What's up, Unbroken Nation? Hope that you're doing well wherever you are in the world today. Very excited to be back with you with another episode here in person with my friend Sondra Shannon. What's up, my friend? How are you today?
Thank you for having me. I'm doing great.
It's my pleasure. I'm very excited to have you here. We're going to have an amazing conversation. It is first and foremost an honor that you'd sit down with me. And so, for those who do not know you, tell us a little bit about your backstory and how you got to where you are today.
Sure. Well, first of all, I just want to thank you for having me in the studio today.
Of course.
This is amazing and beautiful and really excited to be here with you. But, I think if I really think about my story, and I've been thinking about it, a lot lately, as the last couple of years have brought me to where I am today, which is, our life is so long and there's so many things that happen. But when I really look at everything, I think that my story is a journey of self-love. And, what got me to that, and I mean, I guess we can take it way back to when I was a kid. So when I was in third grade, I don't know if they diagnose you with dyslexia. I don't know how that works because I was a kid, but in the school system, they came to my parents and they said, she's 8, she can't read, she can't write. She barely talk. And I was diagnosed with dyslexia. And when that happened, I had severe dyslexia. I mean, so some people can have a hard time with reading, writing, math, or speech. I had all of it, and that was a real challenge for my parents because I don't think they knew how to help me. And my parents were very blue collar. My dad was a butcher. My mom was a cashier. So they really didn't value education that much, and they didn't really understand how to help me because they were also teenagers when they had me. So they were young parents, and they had my sisters and I, all 4 of us, by the time they were 24 years old. And so they had a lot of responsibility at a really, really young age. So teachers tell my mom, she can't read or write. She may never read or write. Of course, it was like the worst thing you could ever tell a parent, right? And I don't know if I'm allowed to say this, but, at third grade, I got held back and they put me into a special education program. And this is what I'm not sure if this is PC to say anymore, but I rode the short bus. And it was really embarrassing, because as a young kid, like I could comprehend what was happening.
Yeah.
I knew that I was struggling with reading, writing, and even speech, but I knew what was going on around me. But it put me as a young child into this really sad place of just not, I didn't have anything to like about myself. All I kept hearing was all the things that I was never going to be able to do. Never be able to do, like I was never going to have the life that everybody else had. And it was bad enough that I lived in a home where there was a lot of stress. So I often wonder sometimes if maybe what was happening to me was, what's the right word? Like
from the stress of the environment.
The stress of the environment.
Well, yeah,
impacted that too.
Yeah.
I mean, I think we know now when kids are under stress, their ability to learn is impaired.
Yeah.
So I don't think anybody really considered that either.
We'll be right back to the show, my friend, but I wanted to let you know about our brand new podcast community for Think Unbroken podcast. I know that for so many trauma survivors like myself, for the longest time, I felt alone, like nobody got it, nobody understood, and that I was just going to have to figure this out on my own. But that's not true. And the reason why we created our brand new Think Unbroken Academy podcast community is so that we can bring all the members of the Unbroken Nation together in a place where we can learn, grow, heal, change, and transform our trauma into triumph. I would love to have you come and be a part of the brand new community. Just check out thinkunbrokenacademy.com or click the link in the podcast description. And I cannot wait to see you there, my friend. Again, just head over to thinkunbrokenacademy.com. And until then, be unbroken. Yeah, I think that's just now being considered. I mean, you go look at any of the work around children growing up in traumatic environments, and that exact thing is a part of that nomenclature.
Yeah, yeah. And I think that was a big part of, that's where it all started, was this diagnosis. But, as I'm riding the short bus and I'm in special ed classes with kids who I think genuinely did need to be there. And then there were kids like me who started to become problems because I think for me, I was very frustrated because there was nobody advocating for me. I never became a problem. And, there were kids that would cut my hair and do all these things. When I say problem, I was not a problem, but I recognize why some kids in that system become problem kids, because, everybody's treated the same in the public school system. And for me, I just knew that I didn't belong there. I just maybe needed a little help. But, in the public school system, they have certain ways that you get a class of 30 kids. You can't just help this one kid who can't read.
Mm-hmm.
So I got sent off there. Now, what that did, though, was as I started realizing I didn't belong there, I started looking at this situation and what I could do. Even as a young person, like, I had enough self-awareness to know that I needed to figure out how to make the most of this because I was stuck. And, home life, it was probably better than my home life to still be there. So I started looking at that situation and going, all right, well, what can I do? And I remember like going to the zoo, and I would start helping the teachers by taking the hands of all the kids that were there that actually needed help. And everybody always thought I was the assistant. Like, eventually, like, even though I was one of the students, everybody always thought I was in charge somehow. I was one of the students in charge because I was always trying to help. And I really, at that point, started realizing that, I felt a lot better about myself being in the service of these other people that were there. And so service has been a huge part of my self-love journey. And I got into junior high, and I had a teacher who, they do these IEPs. He came and he sat down with my mom. And for whatever reason, my mom thought it was so great that I was in a special education program, because she thought, like, she's going to get extra help. This is a great thing. But really, it was killing me inside to be there. And I think I was in 8th grade, and I had a teacher my special ed teacher, who brought my mom in, and he said, why'd you let them do this to her? With this beautiful kid who's got the lowest self-esteem that I've ever seen. And I didn't know what self-esteem meant back then. Nobody really taught me the word self-esteem. And I kept thinking, what's he saying about me? I'm not going to have low self-esteem. Because I'm very, I think if you ask anybody who knows me, I'll say I'm very
Fiery.
I got to prove him wrong. It's like, I was like, I'm going to prove him wrong. I'm not going to have low self-esteem. And I remember thinking that, but I didn't even know what that word meant.
No idea.
Yeah, I had no idea. And I started learning what it meant. And, to me, it meant I had to learn to love myself despite all this other stuff, because I really felt like, as a kid, I was being told that, I was worthless, because you can't read and write. Where do you go from there, right? Eventually, I learned to read and write, but that's a whole other subject I think we could probably cover. But so I'm sitting there, and this teacher, and he really advocated for me. He was like the first grown-up that ever really said, like, she's so much more valuable than this, why would you let them do this to her? Why did you let them do this? And eventually he ended up being, as a kid, I don't know if you can call a teacher a mentor, but I remember, he was who really set me off on this journey of becoming so much more than I ever thought possible. And so much more than I think the people around me had ever thought that I could do because, of what was being said. And he said, I think you need to run for student body. Which was great because, I had never put myself out there. I didn't know if anybody wanted to do that. But because I had been in the service of so many other students, I won. And then I was like, man, I can do this. Then I became a peer tutor, which required a lot of being able to help other students through trauma. We were assistants to actually, the peer tutor program at my school was to help kids who were having difficulties with their mental health. And so we went through a pretty extensive training, and we would assist the school in doing this so that they had another peer to talk to about difficult subjects and things that were happening in their lives. And that was really how I kind of started to release some of what was happening in my life, was just being in the service of these other kids. And I was the youngest peer tutor in the school's ever had. And that really, that teacher, his name was Mr. Llewellyn. He actually died of AIDS in about 2000. I think it was 1992. But I loved him dearly. And I remember leaving for Christmas break, coming back, and he wasn't there. And nobody knew, because back then people weren't talking about that kind of stuff. But, I was just devastated, but I just knew, I was like, man, this guy believed in me and I can keep doing great things. I was having these huge wins for a kid. And despite not even having support at home to do these things, my mom and dad worked all the time. They probably didn't even know any of this was going on. At home, I was also really responsible for a lot of what was happening in the house with my sisters. So again, I found a lot of strength in myself by being there for my family and my sisters and helping to take care of them and make sure that they had a nice life, So I don't know. I hope that answers the question. That's where I first got started. And then, at an early age, my mom, because my parents didn't make a lot of money, my mom was always hiring me out for jobs. And my daughter actually asked me the other day, she said, Mom, or it was my son Danzig. He said, Mom, what was the biggest boost your parents gave you? Now, he thought it was going to be like money, like they boosted you into your adulthood, or they gave, what was the biggest boost, he calls it, that your parent gave you? Because in his friend group, they always talk about all the things their parents are providing for them. And I didn't have that as a kid. I really started thinking about the boost that my parents gave me, and it was at an early age. So I started working probably about the age of 8. My mom would get me babysitting jobs. By 11 and 12, I was like the Kim Dry Charlie for, at home and garden shows. So I put on this outfit. Nobody knew there was a 12-year-old under that costume.
You're a mascot.
I was like walking around in the Kim Dry Charlie. And, at 14, I was doing demos in the grocery store, which is where I learned to love sales. I was the best salesperson that the grocery stores had ever seen
in history.
But that's where I learned to love sales, because, and actually it wasn't that I loved sales. It was just, I knew if I sold all the products out, I got to go home. So I just made sure to get it all off the shelf, because otherwise I had to stay there for 8 hours, right? Selling the product. So when that started happening, the grocery store started stocking up when they knew I was coming. And then they started having me training all of the grown women who got hired on to do the demos. So, I had experience with leadership really young, especially in the workplace, because I was teaching these other women how to do the job and how to sell. And when I was 16, I got to have my first real job. That was my choice. I remember I was so excited. I was like, I'm turning 16, got my driver's license, got a car, and I get to work a job that I want. And I went and got a job at the Chinese restaurant, the little Chinese restaurant in at the time, my parents were living in Heber City, Utah. There's about 10,000 people. We had one stop sign. And there weren't a whole lot of job opportunities, but I remember thinking, I'm going to get that job. And I quickly became the manager, running the entire front end of the restaurant, doing all the hiring. I hired all the girls from my high school, and I really learned a lot about business there. So I was really young, and I had learned how to be valuable. So we kind of going back to boosts, right? When we talk about the boosts that my parents gave me, my parents taught me to work really hard and to be valuable to people. And if somebody gave you a job, it was an honor to be there. And I know a lot of people don't feel that way these days, but it really helped me, because we were able to really grow that Chinese restaurant. And we had the best service, and I was hiring my friends, and it was a great experience. And I did that until I went away to high school. And that was kind of the start of the ramp of where I was going to be CEO.
Yeah, and you had pride, right? And I think that's one of the things that's really interesting. One of the parallels, and I think where we connected, is when I was only 8 years old, I started my first business. Growing up in the Boy Scouts in the hood, which is a very weird juxtaposition and dichotomy, adding in growing up a Mormon Boy Scout in the hood, like now we're really talking. I would go to the Big Lots on the corner of 30th and Georgetown in Indianapolis, and I would steal candy bars, and I would go and put on my Boy Scout uniform. And this is back when kids could walk the streets at 8 o'clock at night. And I would just knock on doors with my Boy Scout uniform on and be like, we're trying to fund a trip. And that's 100% profit margin, by the way. And so that was early on into my endeavors into working. Like, we were working as kids because it was weird. They taught us those skills. Like, I don't know if they still do that with kids and Boy Scouts and Girl Scouts anymore. But what I do know is, like, that transpired in me getting into leadership super young, being an executive super young, making 6 figures super young, the whole nine. And I remember, though, as a kid, though, I was like, man, I fucking hate this. I hate working. My first actual legal job was at a Hollywood Video, just stocking shelves, rewinding tapes back when you used to, like, fine people for not rewinding tapes. What an asinine idea, right?
You got to charge them for that too, right?
And you would charge them for that. Like, Smith, you didn't rewind your fucking tape. That's 87 cents, bro. And, like, I have, like, literally hated it. So you're 16, 17, you're in this, you're building out effectively someone else's business, which is, like, the truth of it. Are you learning to read and write at this point? Like, what
by
has
that
happened?
time I had learned. So, honestly, when I did probably about 7th and 8th grade is where, like, learning clicked. And I think a lot of it came from that teacher giving me that boost of confidence, because I think at that point I just had so many people tell me I couldn't do it that I just didn't care to do it.
There's a resilience study that has been done. I think it's up to 30,000 people have participated in it. And they found that kids who grow up in traumatic households or have learning disabilities or have adverse childhood experiences growing up, if one adult advocates for them, they have a higher likelihood of success.
Yeah.
Like, it's exponential. It's like 100,000% more likely. I'm just making up that number. I'd have to go look at the study again, so I'm sorry for misquoting it. But there's an amazing amount of resiliency that comes from one person believing. And so you're in this place. Okay, so now you're 16, 17, you're running this company. I'm sure you're still in school. Like, what's happening in your life?
I mean, in school, I was failing.
As most entrepreneurs are.
Right. I was doing great on the job. My boss loved me. The people who were working for me loved me, because still to this day, I'm a good boss. I love the people I work with, and I've always tried to make that a fun experience for them, but also make success easy for them. I think that's an important thing. It's something that's always been important to me. So I was failing out of school. And somehow, because I spent all that time in special education, I think they just needed to check a box. So they said, we're going to give her a scholarship, despite the fact that I'm graduating high school with the 2.0. Now, mind you, by that time, I was running the Chinese restaurant. My dad enlisted me to go work at the supermarket with him. So I had 2 jobs in high school. I mean, I remember I would literally start work on Friday at 5 p.m. and I would end Sunday nights and get up and go to school the next morning. And I had worked 2 jobs all weekend, and then I continued to work it all week. And I really did love the work. I mean, I still love work. Work is just, when we talk about, like, doing what you love, I love work. You know what I mean? I don't know how else to say that. It's like, it's a real thing for me. I love working.
Me too.
And even when I worked for other people, I always loved it. So despite barely graduating from high school, I got this scholarship. My mom was so excited. Everybody in my whole family was so excited because they're like, you're the first one to go to college. And I do about 2 semesters, and I'm like, this isn't for me. It was too stressful. I actually preferred being at work. I did not want to go to school. I was failing out of college. And, I didn't want to be disappointing to people because I had this full ride. I mean, who doesn't at least give that a chance? But to me, it didn't mean anything to me. I didn't earn that. It wasn't even where I wanted to be.
Did you know that they had just given you the scholarship?
Yeah, I did.
Okay. Yeah. So you didn't have the sense of I earned it. I actually resonate with that a lot. That makes a lot of sense.
I didn't have the sense that I earned it. I really felt like, I think they just had to take a kid who had been in special education and give them this. And for whatever reason, they picked me. But I didn't earn it. I wasn't happy. It was stressful. I didn't have a lot of financial backing from my parents or anybody for that matter. A grandparent, or it was all up to me. So here I'm going to school, working multiple jobs. I preferred to be at work. but I also was barely surviving. And to me, the solution was to get out of school. And I remember I told my family that I was going to leave school. They were devastated.
Probably freaked out.
Oh, freaked out. I mean, they're still freaked out to this day. I mean, 43 years old. They're still like, you had a full ride. I'm a CEO of a tech company. Like,
that you
where
are.
do you go from there? Like, but they still bring that up. So, I had this full ride. So I leave college and I end up going back to California, which is where I grew up. And it's funny that you brought up the Mormon church because I grew up in Southern California. I grew up in Palmdale, which is like the desert ghetto. And one of the things that I had learned in the Mormon church, like you were mentioning about the Boy Scouts, was they always had us do like etiquette classes, because that was not something that anybody ever taught me, was to be a proper lady or whatever that looked like. But that really did help me. It helped me a lot. I'm very grateful that they gave me that training, because I needed some polish, right? Especially to get where I am today. Hindsight 2020, I'm very grateful that I had that. But anyways, going back to my journey. So I leave college and I go down to California. I'm living with my grandma, and she's like, well, now we got to get you a real job. And she gets me this job at the front desk of some PVC company, which they were making like plastics. And I hated it because, again, it wasn't a job that I wanted. I was just kind of being forced into it because if I was going to live with her, that was what I was going to do. That was her role. And I remember after work, I would sneak out and go play laser tag, which this is going to sound really silly, but laser tag was a huge passion of mine. I really loved paintball and laser tag. I played all the time. And I would sneak out and I'd go get a game in and then go home and not tell anybody that I'd been out playing laser tag. That was my fun. 19-year-olds do a lot of crazy stuff. My fun was going and playing laser tag.
Super intense.
Yeah. But I was really good at it. So I'm in there all the time. And finally I see that they were hiring. They needed a general manager. And here I am, 19. I'm like, I don't think anybody's going to give me this job because I'm 19 years old, but I'm going to apply for it anyways. I go in there. I killed it on the interview. They gave me the job as the general manager of, and mind you, there's 50 employees. And I'd never managed a team that big.
Yeah, but you've been in leadership for like 4 years now.
Yeah, and even in when I was in student body, I learned leadership. The peer tutoring, you learn a lot of leadership. Mm-hmm. And so I get this job at this laser tag place, and I like kill it. I kill it in sales. My employees love me. The customers are happy, and it just was a huge boost for my confidence. I really loved myself and my life at that time. I was very proud of the work that I was doing. And it was a pretty serendipitous thing that it just happened. And I was at a laser tag place. I was playing laser tag as much as I wanted. I used to play like in sync in the laser tag arena, and everybody would be all mad at me. That's what I was into. They're like, this is not laser tag music. But I was pumped to play to that.
Do you think that the reason this came to mind as you were speaking, because it dawned on me like in real time, this is probably the reason why I love working so much, is because I get to be in control of my life.
Yeah. Yeah, I felt real in control at that point.
Yeah.
And the business owner was kind of checked out because I was doing so good. He was like off doing whatever he did. I think he was doing at that point, he was getting into real estate. He was only like a 30-year-old guy. And I think he had kind of inherited it because it was an old Qzar. His family had owned a lot of them. So I don't think it was really his passion either, but I was killing it for him. And so he just let me run the show. And this is where the end of my story kind of starts. If I can bring up Gatemaster.
Yeah, go for it.
Technology, the company that I run today. So we used Gatemaster in that facility. And it was the first iteration of the product. Gatemaster started in 1995. By a guy named Stephen Richardson, super amazing, eccentric guy. And just, there was no software for this market, and he owned a Qzar as well. And this was his brother who owned the facility that I ran. And his software just made my life so easy.
And what did it do?
It did ticketing. It did memberships. It did, it managed the laser tag arenas. It did all the birthday party bookings. It pretty much managed all of the revenue sources of the business. And
So it was a full-on SaaS product.
Yeah. But this was like 1999.
Yeah, we didn't call them that back then.
We didn't call them that back then. And also, there wasn't really much out there. This was like his thing. This was his baby. He just thought of this one day. He was like, there needs to be a software for this. And he made that. And I thought that was pretty cool. Well, his brother ended up selling the facility, the Qzar, which was in Southern California, a few years later. And I think I was 22 at the time. And there was this guy who was working for Steve, and he said, you've got to talk to Sondra. I think she can help you make the product better. Because nobody had really done the things that I had done in the family entertainment space in terms of revenue and growth. Because this was still my competitor at the time was Six Flags. And we were still killing it, right? So they said, you need to talk to Sondra.
And this is in California still.
This is in California. And he was in San Francisco. And they said, you got to talk to her. So they brought me up to San Francisco because I was looking for a job at that point because they had sold the facility. And they took me on the first job. They hadn't even hired me yet. They took me on the job. And it was this batting cage. And they had this team. And I'm just going to tell the story like it really is. There was the guy who brought me in. He was kind of like, he liked me, but he also saw me as competition. So it was really difficult to get time with Steve to really get the job. So I appreciated that he brought me there. But at the same time, I could tell he was like, I don't know. You know what I mean? Like, she might take this thing over. So what I did is I just, on that first day at that batting cage, I just said, these are all the solutions they need. Can you build this? Can you do that? And Steve was like, that'll work. You know, I didn't remember all the things we built. And he's like, you're hired. And he brought me on. And I didn't have much experience with software other than Gatemaster that we'd used. I didn't even have a computer. Here I am. They're like, you're going to work for a tech company now. So I had to quickly buy a computer and act like I knew what I was doing with computers because we didn't have
Where's the on button?
Yeah. I didn't even have a computer. And I remember telling my mom and dad what's going on. They're like, you need a real job.
Yeah.
You need a real job. I'm like, this is a real job. Just let me, because, you know, this would have been like 2002. How do you explain to people that you're going to do technology, didn't graduate from, you're a college dropout, flunked third grade, you know, to them, they thought I just needed a job that had 401k and a retirement and all of the things that, you know, they worked for, right? For generations, people had been working for that. Whereas for me, I didn't care about that.
Yeah.
I was just thinking about right now, like, what can I do right now?
What I think about in that is when I walked away, so at 20 years old, I landed a job with a Fortune 10 company. No high school diploma, no college education, fucking impossible, right? I've shared this story on the show so many times. But one of the things I haven't really shared before is I remember I came home and I'm at my apartment and I decided to go hang out with my best friend. And I'm going to tell him, I'm like, yo, I'm leaving this job. I'm going to start this photography business. And you have to think I was making like 130, which is fucking crazy for a 26-year-old, right? It's unbelievable. It's crazy for anybody, really, if you think about it. And he goes, this is the worst decision you'll ever make in your life. And I just remember like it was almost like he had written me off. He'd just been like, dude, if you do this, you're an idiot. You're stupid. You're never going to be successful. And now I understand it's like the reflection of someone's own inadequacies and fears and things of that nature. But I was like, fuck it. What's the worst thing that's going to happen? I'll go back and get another corporate job, right? How did you navigate this moment of, I'm going to make this transition. It's not a quote unquote real job. Because to a lot of people, real job's sitting at a desk answering fucking phones. Let's call it what it is. Right.
Well, not only that, like at least the people that I was around, you know, my parents, my cousins, you know, everybody in my family, they had all worked blue collar jobs. So the idea that I was going to go work for a tech company was just crazy to them because people who didn't have educations didn't get those jobs.
Why didn't you succumb to the pressure of that though?
And that's that self-love piece. I think for me, I just I just kept saying, why I'm worthy of this.
Mm.
These guys see something in me. You know, I, I've heard you talk about before, like being poor sucks,
Yeah.
right?
Hey, Unbroken Nation, we'll be right back to the show, but I wanted to let you know that you can grab a copy of my first book, Think Unbroken, Understanding and Overcoming Childhood Trauma, for free. If you go to book.thinkunbroken.com, you can download the PDF ebook version of the book and get everything that I know about the baseline of healing trauma for free, downloaded to your email right now. Just go to book.thinkunbroken.com to download your copy of Think Unbroken, Understanding and Overcoming Childhood Trauma for a PDF for your phone. Again, that is book.thinkunbroken.com.
I grew up very, very poor. I mean, and having money, I learned at an early age. If I had money, I had options, right? And so that's why work was also really important for me, because it got me the things that I wanted, right? And so having money gave me options, and I wanted a line on more money.
Mm.
I bought my first home when I was 22, which is crazy.
That's nuts.
By myself. Yeah, I bought my first home when I was 22. And I don't know why I want, there were these, to me, it was like the American dream. I had to buy a home, and I just wanted to do it. It was like a goal. I set this goal, I'm going to buy a house in my 20s. I didn't know anybody who'd done that before.
Yeah.
I was probably the first person in my graduating class to buy a house, right?
Trailblazer.
Yeah. So I bought this house, and it was just setting up these big goals, right? Just continuing to say, I think for me, the reason I didn't succumb is because I always had these big goals out there, like buying a home, that I couldn't go back to working at the grocery store. I couldn't go back to working in a restaurant. I had to figure out how to level up. And so when I had this opportunity with Gatemaster, I knew this is like once in a lifetime. People like me don't get that. Because he didn't care that I didn't have an education, because that first day I went into that batting cage and solved all their problems. I put myself in their service. And that was also something that I did with Steve, was, he was an amazing developer, but he needed help working on his business and growing his business. And to me, it was just a matter of, well, how can I serve this person? How can I be valuable to him? Because he clearly believes in me. And I think that's where the opportunity is going to grow. So I think that's really it, was just, just recognizing an opportunity that was going to help me achieve the goals that I wanted.
Yeah. And a lot of people will balk at that. They'll steer clear of it. They'll convince themselves that they don't deserve it. They'll go, well, I failed third grade and I didn't learn how to read till I was like fucking 14, blah, blah, blah. And that stuff exists, right? What do you think? Is there something that you can point to that is, I don't want to necessarily use the word practical, but the word practical comes to mind. Was there something practical in this journey that helped you step into the ability of trusting yourself? Or was it just like, fuck it, what do I have to lose? Because for me, I learned how to trust myself from being like, fuck it, what do I have to lose?
I think there was definitely an element of, what do I have to lose? Because it was surreal sometimes being in this position where, I didn't really know what to do a lot of the time. I was learning on the job. So there was a little bit of that, but then there was also that part of me that, I really loved myself. I learned to love myself, because of that, going back to that self-esteem piece. I had decided I was going to have high self-esteem. And when I realized that meant self-love, that's a difficult journey, because I'll tell you, I had a lot of people tell me, you're conceited, or whatever that looks like. And it's like, no, I've never looked at what another person had and been jealous or upset with them. I'm like, awesome. How do I get that?
That was not my experience.
Yeah, I was like, how do I do that? Like, I just need to learn. I'm very happy for that person.
So I want to rewind real quick, because I think this would be really empowering for people listening. When you were navigating self-love, self-esteem, what made you realize like one equals the other? And what was the process of you said you chose to learn how to love yourself and to love yourself.
Yeah.
What did that process look like? Because I think like people are so fucking stuck in not doing that.
Yeah. I think you're right. I think a lot of people are stuck in not doing that. But I mean, I think it was a little bit of an evolution. You know, when I think back at like how I was in those special ed classes and when I would see somebody struggling, I would try to help them. And I started realizing that I felt really good about myself doing that because now they're feeling better about themselves. And so it was a little bit of at that in the early stages, it was more and I heard I don't know if there's like a quote or a study. I read something one time that said something that, you know, you can the happiest people are not the people who have the most, they're the people that give the most. I didn't know that back then, but you know, looking back, I can see how that did benefit me. I found a lot of happiness and love for myself in just being giving of myself. And I still today, I mean, I think if you hang around with me, you'll know that, you know, I'll do anything for the people around me, so long as they're not like taking me down.
Yeah.
Because that was a boundary I had to learn later in life, right? That I can't help people there's some people you can't help.
Yeah.
Right. And that's a whole other thing. But
yeah. Let's talk about that. Because I think that matters because, you know, I have this thought, you know, and this might have come from Grant Cardone and planted it in my brain, but he said one time, like, Mother Teresa flew around on private jets. And I was like, that's such a really fascinating point because you're able to still give and have this amazing, powerful, beautiful life. Giving does not equal taking away from yourself. And I think so many people feel like, well, if I want to give, if I want to help the world, if I want to make a betterment of my environment, that means I have to sacrifice, I have to be poor, I have to like be all these things. But I've come to discover that's not true at all. Like you can be successful in life and give and not have to sacrifice and be poor and all those things. But in that process, something that you just pointed to that I think is incredibly profound and important is recognizing that sometimes people are going to try to take you down with them.
Yeah.
What does that look like and how do you navigate that?
I think for me, it's always showed up as some sort of like negative being put towards me, right? So somebody saying, oh, well, that self-love looks like conceited. It's conceited. So they always try to spin it in that way. Or, you know, even in it, I'm trying to think of the best way to answer this. That you want to know what helping somebody who doesn't want to be helped look like. And I think for me, a lot of times it just shows up as somebody who's not changing. You know, I give a lot of business advice to people today. I mean, a lot of people come to me. Just to give some perspective to your audience, you know, I've worked with over 800 businesses in 816 countries grow, scale their businesses, create alignments with their team. Because one of the things that I realized at Gatemaster early on was if I don't help these people with their businesses, this product's not going to be successful. Because it was such a new product or idea. I mean, point of sale wasn't even really a thing. People were still using Casios. We were going in and replacing these old Casio cash registers with software. And a lot of these people didn't know how to use software, but then in addition to that, they didn't know how to run their businesses. So now, today, a lot of people, because of that experience, I mean, I went to 800 locations in 16 countries. When I say that, I've worked with many more businesses than that. I've lost count at this point. But when a lot of people come to me looking for business advice, you know, there comes a point where it's like either they got to do it or they're not going to do it. And I can't waste my time anymore. Right? Because it's their goal. I try to help people find clarity on their goal because it's another important step that maybe I didn't talk about here, but you know, for me, and you know, part of the reason I go by big goal energy is because having these big goals out there in the future really did help me stay the course. Even when I doubted myself, I just kind of knew where I wanted to go. I bought my first house. I knew I wanted a second house someday, and next time it was going to be bigger, right? And actually, when I married Jake, he bought our first house. I bought our second house. You know what I mean? It was just this fun game that we've always kind of done together is what can we do together and build together. But having these big goals out there really kept me on the course. And so I try to help people figure out what their goals are, but there comes a point with a lot of people where they give up on themselves. They give up on their goals. You know, and I have to be like, this is your goal, not mine. I got to kind of back off of putting in my time, energy, and resources into helping you achieve your goals. And to me, that's what that looks like.
Yeah.
Now, right? I mean, I don't really surround myself with people who aren't driven. I just can't. Because there's only so much time, you know? I mean, when we look at our lives and what we want to accomplish, I'm not trying to cut anybody out for because I don't love people. I love everybody. I mean, I can't even think of a person I don't like, really, you know? And I mean that sincerely. But I know that I only have so much time. I mean, I've been with Gatemaster for 20 years. That's a long time to do something. Yeah, I became CEO in 2010. And when I arrived there, I thought, this is awesome. You know what I mean? Like, I'm a CEO now. I became a CEO. You know, there's some interesting statistics in tech. You know, only about 26%, I think actually it's 24% are women in tech. Maybe 15% of females get to be tech CEOs. But the amount of women exiting tech is 45 times higher than men. That's a lot. You know, so that also, once I became a CEO, it became a mission of like, I've got to hang in here. I have a lot to prove now. And I know that kind of took us off on a whole other tangent, but.
And I think two things come to mind. One, and just because I was an executive at a very young age as well, in my very early 30s, like there's a statistic around that as well. Most people in C-suite levels, they're like 45, 50 years old. I was an executive at 31.
Yeah, same.
You know, and it's, you look at that and you're like, whoa, that's crazy. And for me, it was like fucking chip on my shoulder. Like, honestly, it was me looking at wanting to build all these different things, also running side hustles and other businesses and being like, to a word that you used, to prove it. And I don't know if this held true for you, but I was proving it to me. Growing up and everyone always being like, you're not good enough, you're not smart enough, you're not capable enough, you come from a loser family, nobody has money, you know, car repos and homelessness and the whole nine. I was just like, fucking watch me.
Yeah.
Do you think like this process has been just proving to yourself? Because here's everything that I do. And to your point, because people will say, hey, you have this air of ego or conceitedness. And I'm like, no, you don't get it. I'm proving to myself and me alone what I'm capable of doing.
Well, I think that goes back to your question earlier too. Maybe this is a better answer. You know, there's a lot of people that give up on themselves, right? And then don't do what they say they're going to do.
All the time.
Right. So how can you feel good about yourself when you're not doing what you say you're going to do? I mean, even despite if other people care about that, to me, it always meant something to me. Like, I'm still looking. I'm still watching this journey. I don't want to let me down. You know, I love myself. Why would I do that? I wouldn't do that to anybody else. Why would I do that to me?
What do you do in those moments when you do let yourself down though?
I mean, I try to have grace with myself. Usually when I let myself down, it's because I made a mistake more so than
you didn't try.
I didn't try because I'm not the kind of person I'll try anything.
Yeah.
And there are times where I'm like, yeah, well, so, you know, I always wanted to do a bodybuilding competition. So I was training for one when I was in my early 20s and I got injured and I never made it. So when I was 40, I went back and I started training to do all this bodybuilding. I was in the best shape of my life, right? But it came to be about competition time and I was like, yeah, I'm not really into this. It's taken away from my bigger goals, which is work. You know, there were some things that were being required of me, like, the final lean out, where you got to get real
You
lean.
just got to starve
I
yourself
just
for 3
really wasn't
weeks.
into it. And I'm like, I had to just tell myself, look, the 20-year-old me and the 40-year-old me are not aligned as far as that goal was. But I tried. And I don't feel bad about that.
Yeah.
I mean, how many 40-year-olds do you know even try?
Yeah. And that's so interesting too, because I think the older that people get, the more they're willing to quit on themselves.
Yeah.
And I look at it, I have a client, and, working with adult survivors of childhood trauma, like, this is a really intense space. And she's like fucking 64 years old. She's like, I'm going to figure this out. I'm still alive. There is still time. And my hope is that people won't quit on themselves, that they won't give,
Right.
that they'll seek self-love and ultimately find that thing that brings them, fulfillment and joy and happiness, and do it through a word I think you use, which is really important, grace. Because fuck, you're gonna fuck up a lot all the time, every day. And I think so many people get tied into this idea of perfection and making sure it's great so everybody else can see it. And I'm just like, if you knew how many episodes of this show have not been released or were recorded that I forgot to press fucking record, or that the mic wasn't plugged in or whatever, and you're just like, well, you don't quit. You just keep going. Just keep doing it. Big goal energy. I love this idea. I love the concept, because I think that ultimately big goals are what will pull you forward into the existence that you can create. I think a lot of people are stuck in not knowing how to navigate that. So as someone who is a CEO, an entrepreneur, also a wife and a mom, and all the other incredible things that I know that you do that I'll let you bring to light if you choose to, how do you create goals? How do you manage life? How do you move forward with all of the different elements that you have encompassing you all the time?
I think goal creation is a process, and I think that's not talked about a lot, because I think people think you have to have clarity on the goal, right? My goals are constantly evolving. And sometimes I'm trying new things, and then there are a lot of things pulling me, right? I've got my company that I'm running. I have these side projects that I'm doing. I have children. Then I'm trying to be a good parent, and I've heard you talk about this too. I'm trying to break generational behaviors as a parent. And, there's a lot of me going into that, right? And actually that's part of my that's part of my my journey too. There was a time early on when I first had my first kid. Everybody, when I started with Gatemaster, I was the youngest and the only woman. And I remember I could hear a lot of the guys saying, when she has a baby, she's out of here.
You literally heard them say that?
I heard them say it.
Yeah.
And it would break my heart, because I'm like, why can't I have both? Why can't I have both? That being said, I have delivered at least, I was on a client call in labor with my first. I'm really dedicated to this
you're
work
a fucking
thing.
made for TV
Now,
movie.
do I, and granted, I've had women come to me and say, hey, you've created impossible standards for women. But, I'm not trying to create standards for anybody. I'm just competing with me here.
Yeah.
Right? And even with my last, I had him at home. So there was no drugs involved in that childbirth. So I was not talking to anybody, right? With my first, epidurals, it was pain-free. I could take a client call. Right. But with my last, I had him at home, and it happened so fast, and it was painful enough that I was not even interested in talking to a client. And by that time, the company didn't need me to be on a phone call while I was giving birth. They had it. But, I went back to work 2 days later, and it wasn't maybe there was a little bit of I had to prove, but more I had to prove to myself, because I had made a pretty big deal. And I had told them, yes, I'm going to have a baby, but I'll be there. And he came 2 weeks early, so it messed up my plan, right? So I had to go back to work 2 days later. So, I wasn't trying to prove anything to anybody or create any standard. I was just trying to do what I said I was going to do for a client who gave me their money and believed in me enough to say, here's this big check, do your work, You said you're going to be there even if you had a baby. So I did. And I think that's a big part of the goals is just sometimes it looks different than what we thought it was going to look like, you know? And you've got to be willing to evolve with it. You got to be able to go where it takes you. You just can't give up on what that is. Now, when I became a CEO, you know, I didn't know what was supposed to happen from there, right? I just had my eye on it. I knew that at some point Steve was going to replace himself and he was going to need an executive in that position. There was a lot of people going for that role, you know, working towards that goal. And I knew that if I could help him grow the company and be valuable enough to him, I would get that position. And that was really, I don't have an MBA. I didn't go to college. We talked about that, right? But I knew that being valuable was important. And I think that's something that's really lost on a lot of people right now. You know, I don't believe there aren't good people out there. I just think that we have a lot of negative beliefs about work culture today. And I think it's coming from both sides, both the employers and the employees, where, you know, they're not being valued, the employee, and the employee doesn't value the job. Now, I one of the things I talk about, actually, I'm going to be at the Florida Attractions Association next week talking about the generational divide. That was not a title that I picked. I probably would have picked something different. But I think it's interesting because it is important to them. They believe that a lot of this is generational. To me, I believe that, you know, if you don't have alignment, it doesn't matter what generation we're dealing with.
True.
Right? However, you know, you hear a lot of people talking about there's no good people to work these days, right? And I hate that. I hate hearing that because I don't think that's what it is. I think there's a couple of things happening, you know. One, the baby boomers, there's not enough of us to replace them. So the people who are getting the jobs have a lot more options than they did, the people who came before them. And then two, maybe that's created a little bit of entitlement. And so people aren't trying to be as valuable to the people who hire them. You know, I really value the people that want to add value to what I'm doing. And because of that, it's important to me to help them achieve their goals. But that's also how I gauge whether or not this is somebody I should be helping.
Yeah, that's a great point. And I think that applies across the spectrum, not even just from a work perspective, because, you know, the people you're surrounded with matter so much in this journey. And I think we often fail to realize that because we want to, you know, I don't think it's about hurting people's feelings. I won't say never. For a very long time now, I've tried to not be intentional about doing anything that makes anyone feel bad. And I think by the proxy of growth, unfortunately, it's a part of the evolution of self. Like, if you're not in alignment with people, you have to recognize that and honor that and be willing to remove yourself and not pour yourself and your energy into them. Because I'm sure that there's people who they'll want to destroy you over going to work 2 days later. And then a person like me sitting across from you goes, I get it. I had surgery in February. I was working 2 days later.
Yeah.
Right. And it's because this is who I choose to be. It has nothing to do with you. Like, if you want to take a year off after you have a surgery or have a kid, like, more power to you.
Yeah.
I got no disrespect. Like, that has nothing to do with me. And I think that a lot of this is you choosing your path, deciding on who you want to be and executing against it. What do you think is, as we start to wrap up here, what do you think is something really important that people need to know about self-love that you've discovered about this journey that has helped you be a more effective leader?
I think just being an authentic, real person. You know, when I talk to people, be it a client or the team that I have, you know, it's important for me to let them know that I'm a human too. We're all human here, right? The human experience is a lot of trial and error. I don't have all the answers, you know, but I'm willing to try and figure it out. And I think that's kind of going back to the dyslexia. I always say, like, my dyslexia is my superpower because I do see problems differently than other people. And I think that's benefited me. And I am willing to help figure it out, figure out whatever that looks like. You know, I've got a 28-year-old company. We've never been sued, knock on wood, right? We never had anybody come after us because no matter who it was, I was always willing to work through whatever that looked like. And I think that's an important part because if you can do the hard stuff and prove it to yourself. And sometimes in my case at work, it's, you know, dealing with a customer who maybe isn't satisfied with the service or the product that we provided, and how do we make that right for them, right? That's a hard thing to do. I think a lot of people, when faced with just general challenges, will just abandon ship, right?
Truth.
They'll just abandon ship. And for me, you know, if I abandon ship, I don't feel that great about myself. So I don't ever abandon ship. I just go through it. And I think that that's an important exercise with self-love, because when you get on the other side of the hard stuff is where the real magic happens. And that's where the real love lies, right?
Yeah, that's beautiful. I totally agree with that entirely, because every single time that I've pushed myself through the discomfort of not wanting to get up, not go show up, not do the thing, not whatever it is, like, it's like I've quit on myself so many times that I had to reverse that entire mentality and be like, I refuse to quit. Anyone who really knows me, like outside of this show, outside of coaching out, but like the people in my personal life who know me, know when I say something's done, the only difference between success and failure in that is time. Because eventually I'm going to get it done. And and there's hard days, right? There's days you wake up like, I don't want to fucking be a CEO. I don't want to be an executive. I don't want to be a mom. I don't want to be a podcast host. And you go, well, guess what? Do it anyway. Because you made a decision.
Yeah.
And in that decision, you made a commitment to yourself. And like you, for me, self-esteem, self-love, confidence is so important in my journey that I know that the second I stop doing the things I said I was going to do, I can paint a picture of exactly what my life is going to look like. And my hope is that more people will feel empowered about self-esteem. You shouldn't feel like, to me, I think about this all the time. People are like, they'll make fun of me and they'll be like, oh, humble brag. I'm like, I don't want to be that humble. I've earned this.
Yeah.
I work my fucking face off. Like, if I want to brag a little bit, like, can I have some space? And I don't feel guilty about that at all.
I don't either, you know, and I'm to the point now where it's like, I love what I've done.
Yeah.
And it hasn't always been easy. And, you know, it's cliche, but people always say you don't get to see the journey to where you're at right now. You know, I can't cover my 20-year career in an hour conversation. I mean, it's been wild, you know,
sure.
But, you know, I can talk about where I'm at. And there are people who, like you said, don't think that that's a humble position to take. But I think that hopefully that inspires other people to not be humble, right?
Yeah.
Well, I don't have to be. I earn these things. They're mine.
Yeah.
And I'm not, that's not to take away from anybody else. They're just,
it's yours
to keep me on my own path of happiness.
Yeah, 100%. Well, you know, as I always say, if you don't believe in yourself, who will? Before I ask you my last question, my friend, where can everyone find you?
So you guys can find, probably the best place to find me if you really just want to connect is going to be on Instagram at Big Goal Energy. My company is Gatemaster Technology, and you can find us at gatemaster.com. And those are the two best places to find me. If you're wanting to chat, I would definitely shoot over a message on Instagram. That is me on my Instagram talking to people, because it's important to me.
Yeah.
To be connected to people. It is.
Same. I tell everyone, no matter where you find me, the only person touching my social media is me.
Yeah.
My last question for you, my friend. What does it mean to you to be unbroken?
Well, I think what it means to me to be unbroken is, you know, I hate to repeat the same thing, but it's that self-love, you know, just being okay with being imperfect.
Yeah.
Right? It's okay. It's okay to be a real person, having a real human experience. And for good or bad, embracing that and knowing that we only have so much time here. So what are we going to do with what time is left? And for me, I just want to keep doing cool shit with cool people.
I love it. Thank you so much for being here, my friend.
Thank you.
I appreciate you. Unbroken Nation, thank you so much for listening. Please like, subscribe, comment, share, tell a friend. And until next time, my friends, be unbroken. I'll see ya. We'll be right back to the show, my friend, but I wanted to let you know about our brand new podcast community for Think Unbroken podcast. I know that for so many trauma survivors like myself, for the longest time, I felt alone, like nobody got it, nobody understood, and that I was just going to have to figure this out on my own. But that's not true. And the reason why we created our brand new Think Unbroken Academy podcast community is so that we can bring all the members of the Unbroken Nation together in a place where we can learn, grow, heal, change, and transform our trauma into triumph. I would love to have you come and be a part of the brand new community. Just check out thinkunbrokenacademy.com or click the link in the podcast description. And I cannot wait to see you there, my friend. Again, just head over to thinkunbrokenacademy.com. And until then, be unbroken. Thank you so much for listening to Think Unbroken. Please share this episode with someone who could use it and help us move forward in our mission of ending generational trauma in our lifetime. And if you would, please take 5 seconds to pop on iTunes or Spotify, hit that 5-star, leave a review, and you can also reach out to us on social at Michael Unbroken or at Think Unbroken. And of course, you can check out our YouTube channel at Think Unbroken. Thank you for being a part of Unbroken Nation, my friends, and until next time, be unbroken.